तो ये बेसिक बिजनेस फंडामेंटल्स है, कुछ रॉकेट साइंस नहीं है, लेकिन जितना सिंपल है उतना ही मुश्किल होता है। रेस्टोरेंट बिजनेस में दो चैलेंजेस होते हैं।
What are the margins like in a restaurant business?
So if you're selling it for 400 rupees, then 100 rupees is going to rent, 100 rupees is going to your labor, 100 rupees is going to your food cost. So you're left with roughly 70 to 80 rupees as your profit. Now this is the rule of thumb.
So roughly एक स्टोर कितने टाइम में प्रॉफिटेबल हो जाता है या ब्रेक इवन पे आ जाता है? मेन्यू में क्या क्या होगा, ये कैसे डिसाइड होगा? So कितने टाइम का रॉ मटेरियल रखते हैं आप? इसी दिन ऐसा होता है रात को नींद नहीं आती कि सुबह यार आलू आएगा नहीं आएगा पता नहीं है।
We want to make vegetarian cool again. दिल्ली में शायद आज भी अगर आप किसी से बात करोगे तो बोलोगे भाई आप चिकन और दारू के बिना नहीं सर्वाइव कर सकते। So the only way we could have solved for that, customer को टेस्ट चाहिए। If I could give one message to people, don't enter the restaurant business. The conscious age is very simple. The conscious age is going back to the basics of what humanity is.
Hello and welcome to the SOS podcast. We're going to talk about the restaurant business today. Restaurant business has two sides, or like any business has two sides, एक demand side and the supply side. Now, from the demand side, India is booming like never before. Dining out या बाहर खाने का culture बहुत तेज़ी से बढ़ रहा है, and I'm sure you'll relate to it. In fact, a recent report by Nikhil Kamath, where he was sharing how India eats, shared that we only eat about 4 or 5 times on average eating out, right? As against someone like a US or China, जो 28 या 29 बार और almost 30 times एक महीने में बाहर खाते हैं. Interesting, right? And we're going there. But on the supply side, it's a relentless challenge. It's a brutal game. Heavy investment, and you make one mistake and you're out of the business. In fact, some stats tell us that 80% of the businesses, restaurant businesses, fail in the first 5 years. So what is this puzzle? क्या है secret एक successful restaurant business का? We'll try to figure that out today. We have with us Nitin Dixit, the co-founder of Greenr, a restaurant which is trying to change the entire restaurant scene in India. They have introduced vegan and vegetarian diets, and please don't get me wrong, they're extremely tasty. Like me and my friends, my family, at least eat out once a month at Greenr, especially the Gurgaon, the outlet,
Yes.
The restaurant in Gurgaon, 32nd milestone.
32nd milestone.
We love that. So yeah, we'll talk about this and more.
Sure.
Welcome to the SOS podcast, Nitin.
Thank you so much.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. And very nice to be here. Thank you for talking about this subject, very close to our hearts, and happy to share whatever learnings we've gained over the last decade.
So Nitin, like I said, introduction में मैंने जैसे बोला कि restaurant business is it's a brutal game. 8 restaurants out of every 10 restaurants open and close within 5 years.
Yeah.
क्या है इतना challenging that makes it so difficult to crack it?
देखिए कोई भी बिजनेस शुरू करना चैलेंजिंग होता है.
Right.
Statistics show that 7 out of 10 businesses fail, sometimes even higher. पर जैसे आपने बोला रेस्टोरेंट्स में ये वो फेलियर रेट और भी हाई होती है. तो लाइक एनी बिजनेस कुछ फंडामेंटल्स होते हैं जो आपको मीट करने पड़ते हैं. एक तो आपको मार्केट बहुत अच्छे से समझना होता है कि हम वाई एम आई कमिंग इन विद अ प्रोडक्ट और विद अ बिजनेस इन टू द मार्केट, और फिर मेरा प्रोडक्ट क्या है और उसके बाद मैं उसको कैसे प्रमोट करूँगा, कैसे मार्केट करूँगा. तो ये बेसिक बिजनेस फंडामेंटल्स है, कुछ रॉकेट साइंस नहीं है, लेकिन जितना सिंपल है उतना ही मुश्किल होता है. ये मार्केट समझना आसान नहीं है, क्योंकि आपको लगता है आप समझते हो, लेकिन मार्केट चेंज होता रहता है. और अगर आप बिल्कुल एस्टैब्लिश मार्केट में जा रहे हैं तो बहुत सारा कंपटीशन होता है. अगर आप छोटे से मार्केट में जा रहे हैं जहाँ पे आप अपना प्रोडक्ट क्रिएट करना चाहते हो, तो फिर उसमें प्रोडक्ट पे बहुत मेहनत पड़ती है जो कई बार हो नहीं पाता है. और अगर ये दोनों चीज़ें आप कर लेते हो तो फिर उसको किस तरीके से, अगर आपने अच्छे से पोजीशन नहीं किया या मार्केट नहीं किया, तो फिर आप वहाँ से भी फेल हो सकते हो. तो जो एंटरप्रेन्योर है, जो फूड एंटरप्रेन्योर है या रेस्टोरेंटर है, उसकी क्लैरिटी और उसका मकसद बहुत क्लियर होना चाहिए, और उसे पता होना चाहिए एग्जैक्टली मैं क्यों उतर रहा हूँ. बहुत लोग ये होमवर्क नहीं करते हैं, इंट्रोस्पेक्ट नहीं करते हैं कि आप क्यों खोल रहे हो इस बिज़नेस को, और इसीलिए आई थिंक चैलेंजेस आते हैं और फिर आपको पता नहीं होता उस चैलेंजेस को कैसे आप एड्रेस करें. और कंपाउंडेड बाय द फैक्ट कि रेस्टोरेंट बिजनेस में बहुत लोग लाइफस्टाइल की वजह से भी उतरते हैं.
मतलब
लाइफस्टाइल की वजह से मतलब उन्होंने कहीं और शायद अपना पैसा कमाया होगा, या और कहीं उन्होंने या उनकी नेटवर्थ अच्छी है, तो अब उनका मन है कि चलो एक रेस्टोरेंट भी खोल लेते हैं.
हाँ, because I
आप
think
बहुत
everyone wants to.
एग्जाम्पल्स हैं,
Yeah.
इतने सेलिब्रिटीज़ हैं हमारे देश में, बाहर भी, जो एक तरीके से उनको अपने फ्रेंड्स को या सोसाइटी को एक तरीके से एंटरटेन करना है तो अपने रेस्टोरेंट या नाइट क्लब के थ्रू एंटरटेन करते हैं. तो कई बार उस कारण से भी वो रेस्टोरेंट्स खोल लेते हैं. तो हम लोग के लिए तो ये बहुत कोर मिशन है. तो फॉर अस टू डेवलप समथिंग, create something and then bring it to the market, it's a very clear thing कि why are we doing this. तो ये सारी चीज़ें एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को सोचनी चाहिए पहले. और जैसे आपने इंट्रोडक्शन में बोला, इंडिया में डायनामिक्स चैलेंजिंग है, रियल एस्टेट की डायनामिक्स बहुत चैलेंजिंग है. तो आपका अपफ्रंट जो कॉस्ट है वो बहुत हाई हो जाते हैं, स्पेशली प्रीमियम मार्केट्स में, टियर 1 सिटीज़ में. तो वहीं से आपका पहले से सब चीज़ आपके अगेंस्ट काम कर रही है. आपका कैपेक्स भी बहुत हाई हो जाता है कई बार. तो इन सब रीज़न से अगर आपने शुरू में चीज़ों को नहीं समझा या एक क्लैरिटी के साथ अपने प्रोडक्ट के साथ आप मार्केट में नहीं उतरे, तो शुरू से वो दिक्कत हो जाती है. और फिर जब आप पिवट करने की कोशिश होती है तो कई बार गलत पिवट हो जाता है और वहाँ पे फिर फेलियर कभी कभी कंपाउंड हो जाता है. तो ये सारी चीज़ें बेसिक्स हैं, बट बहुत सोच समझ के स्पेशली फूड लाइन में, स्पेशली इंडिया में उतरना चाहिए. बट हैविंग सेड दैट, आई थिंक हम लोग इस पे बात भी करेंगे कि अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ बहुत हैं अभी भी. मुझे लगता है जैसे आपने बोला, मार्केट तो अभी बहुत छोटा है, आगे बहुत अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ आएंगी. तो बट ये क्लैरिटी रहना बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है.
राइट. एंड आई थिंक बहुत सारी बातें आपने कही, पोजिशनिंग, मार्केटिंग, वाई यू आर डूइंग इट, क्यों करना चाहते हो, पिवट करना है, कहाँ पे खोल रहे हैं, डायनामिक्स ऑफ द केपेक्स. सो आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट ऑल ऑफ दीज. सो लेट मी start with the basics. What all is the cost for you in a restaurant business? If I want to set up a business, what all is the cost for you? How do you look at that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the fundamental cost is the upfront cost, which we call the capex, right? You identify a space, 1000 square foot, 1500 square foot, 2000 square foot, depending on आपका format क्या है, आपका product क्या है. एंड उसके हिसाब से आपका कैपेक्स भी बढ़ता है. तो उसी में कई बार कैलकुलेशन लोगों का बिगड़ सकता है, लेकिन कई बार एडवांटेजेस हैं एक बड़े फॉर्मेट को खोलने में, कई बार एडवांटेजेस हैं छोटे फॉर्मेट को खोलने में. तो ये सब भी एक एंटरप्रेन्योर को सोचना चाहिए कि उस किस प्रोडक्ट के साथ किस फॉर्मेट में क्यों उतर रहा है, क्या साइज़ है. क्योंकि कैपेक्स सबसे क्रिटिकल फैक्टर है. आप 20 लाख भी खर्च कर सकते हो, आप 2 करोड़ भी खर्च कर सकते हो. अब आपने 2 करोड़ खर्च कर दिया तो फिर उसकी रिकवरी भी होनी चाहिए ना. तो ये सारे फैक्टर्स बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. और
upfront cost will have your place, the space that you
will
have
primarily be linked to the space,
right, which I'm thinking is the rent
and the rent. But no, more importantly, it's going to be the cost to build up the space, which would include civil work. It would include, let's say, AC, electrical works. It will include interiors and finishings and furnitures and procuring your cutlery, crockery, software, everything, right? That is the bulk of the capital that goes into building a restaurant. The other part of it could go potentially into what we would call, let's say, R&D, right? Now you're launching a product. Before you launch the product, you want to work on the menu, so you will enlist a chef. हाँ, क्या खिलाना चाहते हो, क्यों खिलाना चाहते हो, कैसे आप उस प्रोडक्ट को और सुधारोगे. तो उसके लिए आपको टेक्निकल एक्सपर्टीज चाहिए ना. या तो आप शेफ़ हो या आपको शेफ़ को एनलिस्ट करना पड़ेगा, एक प्रोडक्ट बनाना पड़ेगा, एक मेन्यू बनाना पड़ेगा. उसका भी एक अपफ्रंट कॉस्ट होता है. और फिर आजकल अब ब्रांडिंग बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो गई है, तो डिज़ाइन का भी एक कॉस्ट आता है. किस तरीके से आप कम्युनिकेट कर रहे हो स्पेस के अंदर, किस तरीके से आपका मेन्यू डिज़ाइंड है, सोशल मीडिया का अपफ्रंट थोड़ा खर्चा आएगा. तो वो सब कुछ मिला के आपका टोटल कैपेक्स बनेगा. बट आई वुड स्टिल से 75 to 80% ऑफ दैट इज़ गोइंग टू बी योर physical investment in the space. So how you do that, how you rationalize that investment, again, whether that's 20 lakhs or whether that's 2 crores, how do you justify it against the concept or against the product that you're trying to build and launch? All of these things you have to figure out as an entrepreneur and then come into the market.
Right. So one is that you have set it up. You know, आपने start कर दिया है, आपने जगह decide कर लिया, क्या खिलाना है decide कर लिया. And we'll talk about कि वो menu कैसे बनता है, कैसे decide करते हैं क्या खिलाना है. We'll go there as well. What are the margins like? We have heard कि food में margins are like 60, 80, 100% gross margins. What are the margins like in a restaurant business?
I mean, again, it depends on the type of food, right? And depends on the market, depends on the positioning. But generally, as a rule of thumb, internationally, if you look at it, gross margins would be somewhere around 75%, right? So your food cost would be about 25%.
Yeah, which is the variable cost.
Yeah,
जो आपका-
which is your variable cost. And so the gross margin is roughly that. 25% would be, let's say, your labor cost. This would be your staff, your chefs, your service staff, your marketing staff, etc. 25% generally would be your rent, your utilities, all of that. And then you're roughly left with about 20 to 25% net profits, right? In an ideal world.
Yeah.
Now, this changes depending on whether you're launching a mass concept, a premium concept. And in India, because the alcohol licensing charges are quite high, but the revenue is also significant if you get the product right. Your profits could vary a lot based on that factor as well. So, but generally, if you're doing about 20 to 25% net profits, I think you're doing a good
It's
job.
a good business. I mean, 20-25% net profits are good, I think. I mean,
Yes, but the risk, as we discussed, is high, right?
Yeah.
Entering, not everyone is able to do that. So I think getting that balance right, this is in an ideal world. It's if you cover all your costs and all your buckets are evenly spread out, then you're left with this. But again, when you actually launch, then the reality sometimes is very different, and that's where a good restaurateur or a food entrepreneur has to figure out these challenges and get to that profitability.
So from your experience, when you started, you had your rent, you had your labor cost, you had your raw material or the food cost. जो आपका raw material लगता है food के लिए.
That's right.
These are the top three
buckets. Yes.
What was the most challenging for you?
I mean, the variable cost is obviously a challenge, but because it's variable, you can work around it. The fixed costs are the challenging things, right? Because the rent is going to be what it is, no matter what you do.
पहली तारीख को चला जाएगा.
वो पहली तारीख को जाएगा. अब आपकी सेल हो रही है नहीं सेल. अगर सेल नहीं हो रही तो चलो आपको इतना खाने का खर्चा नहीं जाएगा. लेकिन रेंट तो जाएगी ना. अगर आपकी रेंट 5 लाख है, 10 लाख है तो जाएगा. अगर आपके पास 20, 25, 30 लोग हैं जो इंडिया में टिपिकली होते हैं एक नॉर्मल रेस्टोरेंट में, मीडियम साइज रेस्टोरेंट में, तो उनकी सैलरीज तो बंद ही हुई हैं, वो जाएंगे. तो ये दोनों फिक्स कॉस्ट हैं. तो ऑलमोस्ट 50% ऑफ योर कॉस्ट आर फिक्स्ड एंड दे आर गोना गो, राइट?
उसको आप शायद
उसको कुछ नहीं कर सकते आप.
So what was the challenge for you? So was the raw material a challenge? Because Greenr का जो menu है, that's a vegan menu, it's a vegetarian menu, and the kind of ingredients that you use, amaranth, sweet potato, I don't know how have you made them tasty. We'll discuss about that also. But was that a challenge, the supply chain?
The supply chain was a challenge initially, but we've again been at it for about 9-10 years now. So slowly, all that has improved. So I think real estate is the number one challenge for anyone entering this business,
right?
In India, and solving for that cost and making sure you have the right geography where you launch your product, right? Now, if we were to launch a product in South Delhi versus West Delhi versus East Delhi versus Gurgaon, could get a very, very different response. So all of these micro aspects, micro markets are also important for any restaurateur, food entrepreneur to sort of weigh in when they're launching a business.
So actually I wanted to ask that. I think आपने पहला Greenr शाहपुर जाट में खोला था?
हाँ जी.
Right. How much time did you take to find that place? Shahpur Jai is, for people who don't know, probably it's one of those slightly higher income profile density people are more there, if I were to put it like that.
Well, it's
and it's a sort of a fashion street also. People go there for wedding shopping.
Also,
people go there for good, designer clothing shopping. Sort of those things is what I understand of, or the image of Shahpur Jat that I have.
Yeah.
So, आपने कैसे ढूंढा वो जगह?
देखिए, शाहपुर जाट it's like an urban village. है ना? तो और उसकी लोकेशन बहुत अच्छी है, बिल्कुल साउथ दिल्ली के प्राइम एरिया में, बट इट्स नॉट अ वेरी ऑर्गेनाइज्ड एरिया. वो लाल डोरा में ही आती है. तो वो एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग के साथ या अथॉरिटीज़ के साथ बात करके, मतलब आपको लाइसेंसेस मिलते हैं और आप खोल लेते हो. बट हमारे लिए वो समय इम्पोर्टेंट था क्योंकि हमारा प्रोडक्ट बहुत नया था और हमारा कॉन्सेप्ट बिल्कुल अनप्रूवन था. तो हम बिल्कुल मेन स्ट्रीम कमर्शियल मार्केट में हम लोग नहीं उतर पा रहे थे शुरू में.
Okay.
We needed some initial validation, And that market, Shahpujat specifically, is a very nice eclectic mix of sort of new age Indians, designers, people with some sort of exposure, and also attracts a lot of foreigners. In fact, early days, 2015, we had Hugh Grant, who had come in, just stumbled in onto the first floor, and we were also really surprised. But Shahpujat has that kind of a charm, at least it did at that time, that all kinds of people sort of wander in. So we felt that look, this is an area where we can launch and just test a product.
कितना टाइम लगा वो जगह ढूंढने में आपको when you started?
शाहपुरजाट में तो जगह मिल जाती है, बट बाय चांस हमने
शाहपुरजाट में खोलना है.
हाँ, शाहपुरजाट लोकेशन अच्छी थी उस समय. हॉस्कास विलेज भी अच्छा चलता था, बट थोड़ा सा ऑलरेडी नाइट लाइफ की तरफ जा रहा था. शाहपुरजाट थोड़ी सी शांत थी, तो वहाँ पे हम लोग सोच रहे थे कि हम लोग एक इस टाइप का हेल्थ या वेलनेस टाइप का कॉन्सेप्ट जो थोड़ा सा मॉडर्न है, थोड़ा कैलिफोर्नियन ट्विस्ट के साथ है, वीगन है, एक्सपेरिमेंटल है, तो वहाँ पे हम लोग उसको ट्राई कर सकते थे. तो जगह तो हम लोग को जगह ऐसे भी कई बार मिलती है कि आपको थोड़ा सा कुछ दिमाग में रहता है, फिर आप घूमते घूमते आपको एक जगह मिलती है और फिर वो कनेक्ट हो जाता है. फिर आप लैंडलॉर्ड से बात करते हो, फिर आगे बातें बढ़ जाती हैं. शाहपुरजाट में रिलेटिवली उस समय रियल एस्टेट का कॉस्ट थोड़ा सा कम था, तो हमने सोचा कि वहाँ पे पायलट करके देखते हैं कि लोगों को इसमें इंटरेस्ट है कि नहीं इस कॉन्सेप्ट में और इस मेन्यू में. तो वो एक एक्सपेरिमेंटल टाइम था हमारे लिए, क्योंकि हमारा प्रोडक्ट थोड़ा सा अहेड ऑफ इट्स टाइम था. तो बिल्कुल अगर मेन मार्केट में आज भी हम लोग मॉल्स में नहीं हैं, क्योंकि हम लोग को नहीं लगता कि हम लोग उतना मेन स्ट्रीम हो चुके हैं कि हम लोग मॉल्स में भी हमें उतना एक्सेप्टेंस मिल जाएगा. लेकिन हाई स्ट्रीट तक हम लोग पहुँच चुके हैं. और हाई स्ट्रीट के भी पहले मैं यूँ कहूँगा इस टाइप की एक्सपेरिमेंटल जो जगह हैं जहाँ पे रियल एस्टेट कॉस्ट थोड़े से कम है, वहाँ पे हम लोगों ने शुरुआत की. बट जल्दी फिर यू ऑल्सो रियलाइज कि उससे काम नहीं बनेगा. यू हैव टू कम मेन स्ट्रीम, यू हैव टू कम आउट वेयर द पब्लिक गोज टू डाइन. एंड दैट्स वेयर आवर ट्रांजिशन went from starting in an experimental area to a mainstream area, which is what you talked about, 32nd Avenue in
And that was
Gurugram.
expensive, no? I mean, the rent-wise...
Yes and no. At that time, it was still more affordable. The market was also, we were the second person to enter the market. So I think to some extent, we also helped to establish that market along with several other sort of progressive food brands that came into that market. And today it's a bustling sort of destination in Gurgaon. So, but it's all looking back 2020, right? Yeah. But at that time, it was the right transition from a space which allowed us to experiment to a space that allowed us to test the market more completely, which is what 32nd ended up being for us.
I understand the real estate, I think, is a big challenge, and you've solved it.
Absolutely.
Or you've nailed it probably to an extent, because उसके बाद आपने वसंत विहार खोला, I think.
वसंत विहार खोला.
I think तब तक model format सब test हो गया था. You knew your audience. Yeah. So knowing the audience, like you said, is also one big piece which I can take away.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, Vasant Vihar, the right audience for us. People who have traveled, they're exposed to these kinds of trends. They want this kind of a health product, right? Because health is important for them. So again, that market was almost dead. That used to be the number one market in Delhi at one point. And then the malls came up in Vasant Kunj. And then they basically almost finished that market. But then brands like ourselves and other what we can call third generation brands or fourth generation Indian brands came up and then revived that market. So this is not just a study in how food brands and restaurants sort of come up, but it's also a study in how markets get created. I'm talking about now real estate sort of destination markets around food, beverages, dining, or retail get created. And if you follow the last 10 years in Delhi and even in Bombay, it's a fascinating study of how quick the economics is moving of real estate, of new brands. And it's not just us. There's any number of other brands, as I said, third generation brands, which are coming up and competing head on with international brands, right? which have come from outside. And in fact, I would say there's a very high success rate of domestic brands, perhaps equal number of failures coming in from international. So it's also demonstrated in the last 10 years that you don't need to be an international brand to find success in India.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that Indian entrepreneurs should take a lot of encouragement from, is that, again, if you have clarity of purpose, you know why you're launching a product, you can succeed in India. And you can create a brand, and not just create a brand in India, but we feel very strongly the next 5 to 10 years, you will now start to see Indian brands going internationally. It's already starting to happen. We've had multiple queries from different parts of the world.
Okay.
It's different that we're not able to execute that because, opening a restaurant is difficult, and opening it in different countries is even more difficult. But someday we may go down that road. But the fact is that it's possible. And you see that. And so I think it's a very exciting time for the industry. The next 5-10 years, a lot's going to happen.
And we'll come to the industry part also. We'll talk about what is in store for the Indians or the Indian entrepreneurs in this space and in general in India.
Yeah.
Coming back to the restaurant thing, I think I understood the real estate part of it. I also took away clarity is what you really need to get into this business, right? Let me talk a little about the pricing part of it.
Sure.
How do you price your dishes? I mean, is it cost-based? Is it perception-based? What is it? How do you go about that?
So, good question. It's a combination of both, right? So as we discussed in the beginning, roughly, emphasis on roughly, 25% is food cost, right? And if you're trying to build a business model where you have 25% food cost, 25% rent, 25% sort of service cost or manpower cost, human power cost, then you're roughly left with about 20% profit. So then you basically know that if your food cost is roughly 25%, and if something is costing you 100 rupees, you need to sell it for about 400 rupees. Fair? Simple math, right? So if you're selling it for 400 rupees, then 100 rupees is going to rent, 100 rupees is going to your labor, 100 rupees is going to your food cost, and you're left, after some more miscellaneous costs, you're left with roughly 70 to 80 rupees as your profit. Now, this is the rule of thumb.
Yeah, this is the maths.
This is the maths. Now, it's possible that some of your dishes do very well, right? So you can afford to price it slightly higher, right? Some of your dishes don't do as well, so you want them to move, so you price it slightly lower. But you're optimizing the price so that ultimately you fall somewhere in a 4:1 factor, meaning 4 times the cost, right? Now, the perception is, let's just say, it's a wild example. I'm not saying it always works like this. But let's say Vietnamese coffee is trending, right? Yeah. And everybody wants to have a Vietnamese coffee, right? Or let's say, especially in our business, let's say a matcha latte, because in the vegan world or the hipster world, everyone wants a matcha latte. So you have, the matcha is very expensive, but you can still afford to price it because it's a very aspirational product. Right? So some things you can play on that, but the bottom line remains you need to optimize it and rationalize it so that the price is roughly 4 times your food cost. Right? Okay. And this is, I'm referring mostly towards a high quality dining thing. I'm not going to say premium or QSR or whatever, because QSR, the dynamics are very different. Yeah. But
we'll talk about QSR in a separate episode.
Yeah. Right. So in our case, because we have a big focus on food and food quality, food cost tends to be a little bit higher. So it is roughly at least 25%. So 4:1 is what I'm saying. That's how you figure it out.
Just a wild question. ये प्याज और टमाटर के जब रेट बढ़ते हैं तो आपको भी फर्क पड़ता है क्या?
फर्क पड़ता है, but उस समय झेलना पड़ता है क्योंकि you can't just you print the menu. The whole process of developing a menu. We launch 2 menus a year.
2 menus a year.
Yeah. So with some changes, we don't overhaul the whole menu, but then we launch it for 6 months, and then you have to take those shocks. But however, most restaurants have vegetable suppliers where they guarantee you the cost. But that also means that you pay a higher cost for guaranteed costing throughout the year, right? So, for example, broccoli in the winters can come down to as little as 40 rupees a kilo, right? If you buy it in December, January. But we would buy it at say 200 rupees a kilo, even in December, January, for the assurance that we will also get the same cost even when broccoli could go up to 300 rupees a kilo in the market.
Oh, okay. So you do it's a fixed
It's a fixed thing
contract
for
sort
the
of a
entire
thing.
year. So that sort of shields you from the market. So then it's also on the vegetable supplier, and he has his own economics. He has to figure out. So a little bit of risk is passed on to him. We take a little bit of a hit on a higher cost, but it also allows us to do better food planning, food cost planning, so that we know that we'll get this at a certain rate throughout the year.
So did you know about the whole food cost planning part? Because the supply chain of it, how do you manage that? How do you manage the supplies? How do you manage the cost?
We didn't know it in the beginning, but you learn these things very quickly as you go along. And especially if we're operating now in the process, almost 7 to 8 restaurants.
Give us a scale. How much broccoli do you buy in a year or a month?
I wouldn't know exactly how much broccoli,
Roughly,
but I mean
one of those, one or two of your main ingredients, top consumed ingredients.
I don't have that data on the top of my head, but some of it can go very high.
Yeah.
Because some of our dishes, for example, our Baja black bean nachos, which are a universal hit, at least in Delhi, Bombay, and Goa, where we exist, accounts for 10% of our sales.
Okay.
One dish out of 140, right?
There are 140
items.
Unique items that you
about
have.
70 in our food and 70 in our beverage menu.
Okay.
And one dish accounts for 10% of your sales. Right? So,
then
that's how almost every table that's coming to dine with us is ordering that dish, right? And so it has that kind of popularity. So obviously anything that's going into it, whether it's black beans, whether it's avocados, whether it's like a tomato salsa that we make, is going to be made in very, very large quantities, or even the nachos that we make in-house.
Right.
Constantly every time I go into the kitchen, there's being nachos are being made. So it just depends, but the consumption can go very high. We have about 25 to 30,000 people coming in every month through the restaurants. So depending on the popularity of a dish, the ingredients could go
कितने टाइम का
very
raw
high.
material रखते हैं आप? मतलब if I were to ask you inventory of the raw material, let's say Baja black bean nachos, इसका raw material जो है वो आपके पास at any given point of time, because I don't know कहाँ से आ रहा है, इंडिया से आ रहा है, बाहर से आ रहा है?
नहीं, मोस्टली 90-95% सोर्सिंग हमारी इंडिया से होती है.
अच्छा.
और हम लोग कोशिश वही करते हैं, क्योंकि इफ़ यू ट्राइंग टू बी सस्टेनेबल, बट कुछ स्पेशलाइज्ड इंग्रेडिएंट्स जो मतलब वो बाहर से आते हैं, जैसे और स्पेशली ड्राई इंग्रेडिएंट्स. फॉर एग्जांपल समथिंग लाइक आंचो चिली, शायद आपने सुना भी नहीं होगा. तो बहुत मेक्सिको इज़ नोन फॉर अमेजिंग चिलीज़. Actually, South Central America is known for amazing chili. That's the contribution. So many amazing chilies have come from them. But a lot of amazing flavor comes from these chilies. So there's the arbol, there's the negro, there's the ancho chili. And so some of these flavors that we're trying to bring in our cuisine come from that. So that, unfortunately, we cannot get in India. Though a lot of farmers are now growing new crops in India, foreign things as well. So there's a lot of innovation happening in the Indian sort of supply side also, and from the farmer perspective as well. But some ingredients we import, but all the bulk of the ingredients we still get from India.
So at any given point of time, I was asking the inventory, how much would be the inventory in number of days?
Yeah, so the thing is कि देखिए ग्रीनर की जो पोजीशनिंग है, हम लोग कोशिश करते हैं कि खाना फ्रेश रहे, और हम लोग प्रिजर्वेटिव्स नहीं यूज़ करते हैं. हम लोग का खाना जो कहते हैं ना क्लीन ईटिंग है. क्लीन ईटिंग मतलब नो कलर्स, नो एडिटिव्स, नो प्रिजर्वेटिव्स, नो. सो उसमें क्या होता है, बार बार आपका खाना बनता रहता है. तो और क्योंकि हमारा अब फ्लो भी अच्छा हो गया है, वॉल्यूम्स अच्छे हो गए हैं, तो मीज़ा प्लस एज दे से मीज़ा, which is basically your preparation of your, the base preparation of your dishes.
It's called Misa.
Yeah, Misa.
Okay.
This is basically all the common ingredients that go into all your dishes. So let's say a burger patty, or let's say a bread, or let's say a sauce, or let's say a condiment, or let's say a dressing, right? And then you make the actual burger and you put all of these things together, right? So all of these things are almost done on a daily basis. Certain things we will end up putting in, let's say, a freezer for a few days, but generally that also just is put in the freezer for a few days, and within that time it gets again replenished and consumed. So we're able to manage this by keeping the food as fresh as possible, but the churn of the preparation happens almost on a daily basis. So you have vegetable supply coming on a daily basis, and this is good because it allows the food to be fresh. Yeah, it's risky maybe if when you're starting out, but that's the thing that we've had to build over the years, so that we've created enough demand that we're able to provide a fresh product without preservatives, etc., and get enough volumes where we can prepare it fresh every day almost.
So ये किसी सेंट्रल लोकेशन पे आता है और वहाँ से डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होता है, या हर रेस्टोरेंट पे अलग-अलग जगह?
नहीं, अभी हमारा बेस किचन का कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है, तो अभी हमारे सारे इंडिविजुअल किचन्स पे डिलीवरी होती है, और वहीं से सब प्रेपरेशन इंडिविजुअल किचन्स पे ही होती है.
How many people take care of this part? I'm sorry, I'm going a lot in detail because this is very intriguing. But
I mean, there's a whole procurement team that just works on the coordination with vendors to get coordinate and the vegetable suppliers, etc. So someone constantly makes the procurement list for the next day. It goes out to the vendor. The next morning, the vendor comes, supplies those things to you. It's a common thing in the restaurant business. You get to sort of do it and you get used to it. Everyone else was, ये होता है ना, शुरू में सब नया लगता है, लेकिन एक बार जब आदत पड़ जाती है, रोज आप वही कर रहे हो, तो फिर वो सिस्टम में हो जाता है.
किसी दिन ऐसा होता है रात को नींद नहीं आती कि सुबह यार आलू आएगा नहीं आएगा पता नहीं है?
शायद शुरू में होती थी, बट अब इतने प्रोसेसेस हैं, इतने लोग हैं, वो सब उनका काम है, तो वो उस चीज़ को समझ चुके हैं, उन्होंने पहले भी किया है, तो अब उस चीज़ के से मतलब नींद तो आ जाती है, बट बहुत सारे कारण हमेशा होते हैं बिजनेस में जिसकी वजह से नींद नहीं आती है.
Right. Yeah, so coming back to the menu part of it, because now that you have multiple restaurants, multiple locations, one very important thing is कि मैं वसंत विहार जाऊँ, शाहपुर जाट जाऊँ या गोवा जाऊँ, मेरे को सेम टेस्ट चाहिए.
Correct.
Right. So how do you manage that? How do you make sure कि यार मेरा टेस्ट सेम है, क्वालिटी भी सेम है, और वो कंसिस्टेंट है एवरी डे?
राइट. तो ये इंडिया में बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है, बिकॉज हमारी सप्लाई चेन स्पेशली पैन सिटीज़ इतनी अभी और इम्प्रूव होनी है. अब आप अगर एक बहुत बड़ा रेस्टोरेंट चला रहे हैं, जैसे कोई नेशनल पिज़्ज़ा चेन है या नेशनल बर्गर चेन है या जो भी है, तो उनके बहुत एक्सटेंसिव सप्लाई चेन मल्टीपल सिटीज़ में इस्टेब्लिश्ड है, मल्टीपल बेस किचन्स हैं, हर सिटी के लिए बेस किचन है, तो हर पूरा उनका एक तरीके से इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोसेस है, सोर्सिंग से लेके बेस किचन तक, बेस किचन से लेके आउटलेट तक, वैसे ही चलता है. हम लोग का, क्योंकि हम लोग एक प्रीमियम कैटेगरी में आते हैं, और प्लस हमारा पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट भी ऐसा है कि हमें फ्रेश खाना देना है, तो हमारा कॉन्सेप्ट उस तरीके से अभी नहीं चल सकता है. प्लस हम सस्टेनेबल भी होना चाहते हैं जितना पॉसिबल है. हम चाहते हैं कि लोकली सोर्स करें, लोकली जितना हो सकता है अपना करें. तो उससे क्या होता है कि एक ही फैक्टर होता है, प्रोसेस स्टैंडर्ड्स और मैन पावर. इन चीज़ों से कंसिस्टेंसी आ सकती है. तो हमारा जो स्टाफ है वो कई बार रोटेट करता है. जो दिल्ली में है वो बॉम्बे जाते हैं, जो बॉम्बे में है वो गोवा जाते हैं, जो बॉम्बे में बैंड्रा में है वो कई बार ब्रीच कैंडी जाते हैं. तो ऐसे ऐसे स्टाफ रोटेट होता जाता है, तो हमारी एक्सपर्टीज़, हमारा नॉलेज वो भी रोटेट होती जाती है, क्योंकि इंडिया में मल्टीपल सिटीज़ में ऑपरेट करना भी आसान नहीं है इतना. तो उस तरीके से लार्जली हम लोग फूड कंसिस्टेंसी को मैनेज करने की कोशिश करते हैं. मैं कोशिश इसीलिए कह रहा हूँ क्योंकि मैं बहुत ऑनेस्टली एडमिट करूँगा कि वो तब भी उतने मेरे सेटिस्फैक्शन के लिए नहीं हो पाता है. बट वही चैलेंज है. एज अ इन दिस बिजनेस यू हैव टू कंटिन्यूअली वर्क ऑन दैट. आप कभी भी कंप्लेसेंट नहीं हो सकते कि आज हमारा खाना हर जगह सेम टेस्ट हो रहा है, बिकॉज इट्स द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज. कॉन्स्टेंटली कुछ ना कुछ होता है. जो एक लाइन शेफ है वो बोलता है यार अब मैं रेसिपी को नहीं देखूंगा क्योंकि मैं इस चीज़ 10 बार बना चुका हूँ. 10 बार बना चुका है, लेकिन उस रेसिपी में 15 चीज़ें हैं. अब वो एक चीज़ अगर भूल गया तो वहीं पे उसका टेस्ट वो नहीं सेम नहीं रहेगा। और फिर वो अगर एक छोटा हिस्सा है एक बड़ी डिश का, तो कम से कम मुझे पता चल जाएगा कि वो बात नहीं है। शायद कस्टमर को पता चले नहीं पता चले। तो हम लोग क्या करते हैं कि फूड कंसिस्टेंसी को की जो भूल हो सकती है उसको मैनेज करने के लिए हम रेसिपी का इनोवेशन करते रहते हैं, स्टैंडर्ड टेस्ट का बढ़ाते रहते हैं, जिससे अगर थोड़ा बहुत मिस्टेक हुई भी और हमारा जो बेंचमार्क है उससे अगर हम लोग थोड़ा गिरे भी, तो भी वो जो स्टैंडर्ड है प्रोडक्ट का वो एक्सेप्टेबल हो कस्टमर के लिए, राइट? क्योंकि हमें एक रेंज है ना। आपका प्रोडक्ट मान लो 10 पे होना चाहिए, लेकिन जो हम लोग कहते हैं ना भारत में 19-20, है ना? तो अगर 19-20 है तो चल जाएगा, बट हमने उसको 20 हमने प्रॉपरली बनाया है, जिससे अगर थोड़ा गिरे भी तो भी हमारे हिसाब से वो एक एक्सेप्टेबल है। बट ये नहीं कि हम उसको एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं, हम तब भी अपने प्रोसेसेस पे काम करते रहते हैं, ट्रेनिंग पे काम करते रहते हैं, रोटेशन पे काम करते रहते हैं, जिससे हमारा मतलब हम लोग उस पर जागरूक रहें और अपना फोकस उस पर रखें, क्योंकि फूड कंसिस्टेंसी इज़ द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज फॉर ongoing businesses.
So processes is what you're trying to standardize. So that
processes following, let's say,
spacing.
recipes, well documentation, standardized equipment, space for executing the mise en place, and the preparation of these dishes. All of these things are technically very important. Coordination amongst the team, making sure that the sous chef is constantly sort of checking in, tasting on a daily basis, all the components of the dishes, which happens in a fine dining restaurant also. Doesn't always happen in all restaurants, but is an important part of the work.
So let's take your the nachos, the Bha black bean nachos, as an example.
Sure.
एक प्रोसेस बनाया मैंने, अभी जो शेफ है वो रोज उस प्रोसेस को देख रहा है और बना रहा है।
देखना चाहिए और फिर बनाना चाहिए, बट अगेन जो मैं कह रहा हूँ ना,
आदत हो गई है तो
आदत हो गई, वो उस चीज़ को 10 बार नहीं 50 बार 100 बार बना चुका है। तो कितनी बार वो बोलेगा कि यार मैं अब केचप की रेसिपी देखूँ मैं, बट हम लोग तब भी बोलते हैं बस बीच बीच में देखते रहो, क्योंकि अगर कुछ भी थोड़ा बहुत ऊपर नीचे हुआ तो वो टेस्ट नहीं होगी। क्योंकि आप ऐसे समझिए कि किसी भी चीज़ को सेट करने के लिए बहुत मेहनत जाती है। जब हम लोग फूड ट्रायल्स करते हैं, जब एक नई डिश लॉन्च करते हैं, तो उसमें एक एक इंग्रेडिएंट की इम्पोर्टेंस होती है। ना खाली इंग्रेडिएंट की इम्पोर्टेंस, किस रेशियो में वो इंग्रेडिएंट एक डिश में जा रहा है उसकी भी इम्पोर्टेंस होती है।
करेक्ट।
तो या तो वो रेशियो बिगड़ा, या वो इंग्रेडिएंट बिगड़ा, या वो इंग्रेडिएंट की क्वालिटी बिगड़ी, कोई भी चीज़ से उसका बैलेंस उस डिश का बिगड़ सकता है। और फिर आप ऐसे इमेजिन करिए कि वो एक कंपोनेंट है उस डिश में, जिस डिश में 9 से 10 भी कंपोनेंट्स हो सकते हैं। जैसे हमारे नाचोस में आई थिंक 7 से 8 कंपोनेंट्स हैं, राइट? तो कुछ भी उस डिश का बैलेंस को ऑफ कर सकता है ना। और हम लोग एक फाइन डाइनिंग रेस्टोरेंट तो है नहीं कि हर जगह मतलब हेड शेफ भी खड़ा है, सू शेफ भी देख रहा है, लाइन शेफ्स भी खड़े हैं, सब लोग, मतलब उतना तो प्रोसेस बिल्कुल इम्पॉसिबल है। हम लोग वॉल्यूम्स हैं एक, तो इसमें प्रोसेस से ही आप चीज़ों को इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं, और आपका एक डिलिजेंस जो होता है, एंड जस्ट रीइंफोर्सिंग एंड एवरी डे टेलिंग द किचन दैट लुक, keep following the process. I know it sounds very mechanical, but it's important.
It's important, yeah.
It's
I think that's the crux of it.
Yeah.
I can feel it from your answer, or the way you're explaining it. Ki consistency ही
is everything. Restaurant business में 2 challenges होते हैं. एक होता है product market fit, कि initially आपने जो product launch किया उसको acceptance मिला कि नहीं, वो सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज होता है।
And we'll talk about that in detail, yeah.
I know we're going to talk about that, but that challenge is there in any business. But once you get product market fit, how do you maintain that, right? And that challenge comes in from the food consistency challenge, right? But there's so many variables in this, right? And it's not industrialized food. If this was just like something where a robot is making it, and it's coming out of a factory and out of a package, then it's much more controllable. Here you have a lot of human sort of parts,
elements, yeah.
right? And
chef change हुआ, कोई chef ना
कुछ भी है, हाँ. Plus local sourcing में आज ऑरेंज की क्वालिटी गिर गई, कल स्वीट पोटैटो की क्वालिटी गिर गई, तो ये सब भी सोर्सिंग चैलेंजेस होते हैं। तो
गोवा में जो ऑरेंज है और दिल्ली में जो ऑरेंज है वो अलग टेस्ट करता है।
एग्जैक्टली सीजन्स में फिर वही ऑरेंज अलग चेंज करते हैं। तो ये सब कुछ फैक्टर होना चाहिए प्रोसेस में, जहाँ पे आप कॉन्स्टेंटली चेक कर रहे हो कि क्या प्रोड्यूस आ रहा है, वो क्वालिटी है कि नहीं, फिर बाकी एस्पेक्ट्स जो हम लोगों ने डिस्कस किए.
Wow, it is much more complex than I thought it was. Sorry, yeah. Let me go one step back. You said कि एक साल में करीब करीब 2 बार जो है मेन्यू आप चेंज करते हो.
जी.
टेल मी फ्रॉम द स्क्रैच.
Yeah.
आज आपने सोचा एक रेस्टोरेंट बिजनेस खोलना है मेरे को. वीगन वेजिटेरियन डाइट होगा, ये मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया. मेरा कस्टमर कौन होगा मेरे को डिसाइड कर लिया. क्यों कर रहा हूँ मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया. मेन्यू में क्या क्या होगा ये कैसे डिसाइड होगा?
मेन्यू में क्या, जब देखिए, जब आप कहते हैं मेन्यू में क्या क्या होएगा, आप बेसिकली प्रोडक्ट के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. तो अगर आपने प्रोडक्ट नहीं डिसाइड किया है तो फिर आपको मार्केट में होने ही नहीं चाहिए.
No, I'm saying when I'm starting, yes.
Yeah. तो प्रोडक्ट डिसाइड करना बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है.
What is that process?
What is that process? So let's take an example.
जब आप स्टार्ट कर रहे थे, if you can go back, recollect, जब आप अपना मेन्यू डिज़ाइन कर रहे थे पहली बार.
So हमें पता था कि हम कुछ वेजिटेरियन में कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग करना है. और क्यों करना है, आई थिंक वील मे बी एड्रेस दिस इन द फ्यूचर, इन द लेटर पार्ट ऑफ दिस डिस्कशन. बट हमें पता है हमें कुछ हेल्दी इंट्रोड्यूस करना था. हम उसको हेल्दी उस तरीके से नहीं कहते हैं, बट वी न्यू वी हैड अ क्लियर डेफिनेशन ऑफ व्हाट वी से इज हेल्दी.
Your vision was clear.
Our vision was clear. We wanted to introduce something. We wanted it to be vegetarian, plant-based, vegan in some cases, in many cases. So that was also very, very clear. Now we wanted to launch a product in a market where the perception of vegetarian food in the country at that time was, let's say, paneer, right? Or dal, or like a aloo burger or something like that, right? Even today, if you look at a vegetarian option for a burger, what do you get? Paneer.
Correct.
Or aloo
burger, yeah.
right? ज़्यादा अब जो नए चेन्स आ रही हैं उसमें बीटरूट का कुछ आ गया या मशरूम का कुछ आ गया.
But I've heard that उसका percentage of consumption is
if you look at it from a mass perspective, it's probably not even 0.1%, right? So from a mass perspective, that's the perception of where it is. But again, we were not necessarily addressing the mass market to start with, right? At the same time, we wanted to make the concept and the product aspirational and interesting even for non-vegetarians, right? So because at that time you have to understand the whole world was already going vegan and vegetarian, right? This is maybe and this is not new in India, but India में जब होता है ना, घर क्या कहते हैं वो, घर की मूली
दाल बराबर.
हाँ, जो वही. तो basically हम तो हैं, we're the largest vegetarian country on the planet, right? 30% of the population is considered vegetarian. But if you look at the most interesting vegetarian innovation in terms of food, it was all happening in California. It's probably still happening in California.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because they went vegetarian by choice. They're traditionally meat eaters, and they said for reasons related to sustainability, reasons related to personal health, or reasons related to ethics, we want to be vegetarian or we want to be vegan.
It was a realization, it was a choice that they made.
It was a conscious consumer choice that they made. And from there, the whole innovation started in the vegan industry in America 30 years ago, then started to increase, and it continues to sort of happen today also. So we felt that was an area to take inspiration from and reintroduce vegetarian in India in a new way, right? Because the concept and the perception of vegetarian in India was defined, very, very clearly defined in 2015. We said it could be a lot more interesting, right? We wanted to, if I can say this, we wanted to make vegetarian cool again, right? It was not cool.
Yeah.
दिल्ली में शायद आज भी अगर आप किसी से बात करोगे तो बोलोगे भाई आप चिकन और दारू के बिना नहीं सर्वाइव कर सकते
रेस्टोरेंट्स में नहीं आ सकते. हाँ.
और उस समय तो बहुत मुश्किल था, है ना? तो to launch something vegetarian, was a challenge. We didn't have alcohol. We still don't have alcohol at Greenr. So we had our work cut out for us. So the only way we could have solved for that was to have a very strong product which associated with people who were looking to eat something healthy, and further with people who wanted to make a conscious choice which was better for the planet and empower the planet through this kind of a food choice. So that was the kind of challenge that we were trying to address.
हाँ, बट कस्टमर को सबसे फर्क नहीं पड़ता, कस्टमर को
कस्टमर को टेस्ट चाहिए. तो ये सब तो कहानी सही है, और वो हमारा मिशन था, पर्पस है, बट वो कोई, जैसे आपने बोला, नोबडी केयर्स अबाउट.
मैं ग्रीनर में खाना खाने जा रहा हूँ, मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता है कि
आपको फर्क नहीं पड़ता. अगर वो है तो बहुत अच्छा है,
गुड,
लेकिन मेन चीज़ है टेस्ट. सो फ्रॉम द डे वन, इनफैक्ट आई वर्कड विद शेफ्स which knew how to really work with meat, right? They were cordon bleu chefs and well trained, very highly skilled in terms of their techniques. And so we worked with them, say, okay, you have all these amazing skills. Now let's apply it to vegetarian ingredients. Let's look at some recipe references and let's create a product. So that's how we started to create a new category of vegetarian. But in an existing market, which was already big.
मेन्यू बनाने में
इनिशियली तो मतलब 2-3 महीने में हमने पहला मेन्यू लॉन्च कर दिया था. बट फिर क्योंकि हमारे पास एक लाइव ऑडियंस थी, कस्टमर बेस था, उनके साथ हमने एक्सपेरिमेंट किया हमें. और द बेस्ट थिंग अबाउट द रेस्टोरेंट बिजनेस, आपको बहुत जल्दी पता चल जाता है कि आपके एक्सपेरिमेंट्स फालतू के हैं कि इससे कुछ फ़ायदा होएगा.
कैसे?
क्योंकि कस्टमर आपको तुरंत बता देता है.
अच्छा नहीं लगेगा तो.
और अब तो बिकॉज लकली वी हैव द बेनिफिट ऑफ अ सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ वॉल्यूम, I just have to look at the sales report of the last 2 weeks, maximum a month, and I know which dish is doing well or it's not doing well. And this has nothing to do with the kind of marketing support we might do to promote a dish or not, just by virtue of the way the dish tastes. And the only way I can explain it, from my experience at least in this business in the last decade, is that if people like something, they talk about it in private to their friends or to their family. And then those people come back immediately, and then or immediately or soon after, and then they try a dish. Or those people come back again, and you retain them as customers, say, I really like that, so I want to try that again. So this happens
so you're just
very
looking at
often.
Repeat rate of
So this
orders.
is, we talk about the challenges, but this is one of the things that's really a big positive in this restaurant industry, that as a restaurateur or a food entrepreneur, if you have a product, you'll get to know very quickly whether your product is being accepted or not. And if it's not, you better work on it and make the right corrections. And I fully believe in the customer. The customer is our hero. The customer is our biggest validator. The customer is our celebrity. Greenr has never been a brand that's sort of been influencer driven, been celebrity driven. We believe and live and die for our customers. And I think all of us, who has been involved with the Greenr journey, we're grateful for our customers. And the reason I'm emphasizing this enough is that it's extremely important to be customer focused. This is not just some business jargon. It has to be lived on a daily basis. You have to listen to the customer relentlessly. He will tell you right away. And you cannot have that kind of arrogance to say, अरे यार इसको नहीं समझ में आएगा टेस्ट. आप ये नहीं कह सकते हो कि मैं समझता हूँ, मैं शेफ़ हूँ या मैं रेस्टोरेटर हूँ, मैं खाना समझता हूँ. ऐसे आप सर्वाइव नहीं कर पाओगे. And in my experience, taste is universal. You might have a refined palate, but if it's really good food, I've seen multiple generations, multiple demographics come through and enjoy the same dish, and they'll tell you. So there's some part of it which is very universal. And when you get that right, that's the biggest validation. You don't need anyone else. You don't need a food critic. You don't need an influencer. You don't need any celebrity to sort of tell you otherwise. You do that right, your business will survive. Greenr is a case study of that. We're grateful, and I'll use this opportunity to sort of say, please reach out to us if and we are listening to you, no matter where we might have reached, as a brand that continues to be a very, very, very strong area of focus for us. Listening to the customer and making sure that they are happy with the product.
Right. You are not a chef, right, Nitin? आप chef नहीं है by education or by any means, right? No. So when you're designing a menu, आपके chefs become very important, right? आपके chefs जो है, they are the central point, क्योंकि सब कुछ उन पे dependent है, वो कैसा dish बना रहा है. Is it or not? Or how do you manage that? Because वो chef जाएगा तो आपका पूरा menu.
देखिए, again, yes and no.
Okay.
Everyone is important in an organization. Whatever happens is a result of teamwork, right? I firmly believe in that. We have a strong team, every area of Greenr. At the same time, as someone giving direction to the product and the vision of the product is supreme. And how you build that product is most important. The restaurant is just a way of delivering value. The product is just a means of delivering that value. But the product is above that. I hope that makes sense. So when you're constructing a product, when you're putting a product together, you have to know why you're doing it. Why are you making this kind of a burger? Like a burger at Greenr is very different from, let's say, your classical or conventional definition or perception of a burger, right? So what is a Greenr burger? What is a Greenr pizza? How is it healthy? How is it tasty? How is it? So these are the things we go very deeply into defining the structure of what this product looks like. How is it framed? How is it influenced by what's happening? There's so many things known, perhaps comes from my own exposure to food over the last several decades. And from there, you create a rough prototype or a rough grammar of what the product looks like. That is translated in technical terms by a chef. So it's the combination of having a product mindset and then having that technical mindset where a business becomes a restaurant, a product becomes a menu or a dish, right? But it's this thing that creates that value. But the value is still here primarily. The value is, or the intellectual property is in how you're creating that product, in how you're structuring that product. And that an entrepreneur should know very clearly. And that goes back to where we started, as to how do you enter a market, what vision do you have, what are you entering a product with. And all these things may seem intangible, but trust me, somewhere it's communicated through your product to the customer. And the customer holds that place for you amongst the brand choices that he has in the market or in the ecosystem. And so that when something clicks in his mind and he says, today I'm going to eat at Greenr. Tomorrow I'm going to eat somewhere else. Whatever. But these are the things that ultimately create the product. So the product is supreme. Right. That's not to take away anything from chefs. It's without them we wouldn't be here, and they're critically important to the mission. But again, it has to be driven by the entrepreneur. And that's where the primary value comes from.
Right. And the revision of the menus is just basically doing
iterations mostly. Once it's established, once you have product market fit, you know what the customers are responding to, then your iterative part comes in, right? Like changing things, tweaking things, improving things, seeing what people want a little bit, finding the common ground and meeting them in the middle.
Right. Very interesting, by the way, that you sell amaranth, sweet potato as main ingredients in your dishes. किसी को मैं बोलूँगा कि वो शकरकंदी स्वीट पोटैटो दैट वी हैव कोई वैसे ही खा ले रोज अगर तो इतना टेस्टी वो कभी लगता ही नहीं. आई डोंट नो व्हाट हैव यू डन टू द प्रोडक्ट बट kudos to you honestly. Those ingredients were never heard of and probably we didn't know how to make them tasty also. I mean, क्योंकि हेल्दी के साथ एक परसेप्शन आता है कि टेस्ट अच्छा नहीं करेगा. हेल्दी है बट टेस्ट अच्छा नहीं करेगा.
Right.
And I think that is something that you've found that sweet spot कि healthy भी है और tasty भी है.
Yeah.
How?
Actually, it's very simple. This might I'll have to elaborate a little bit.
Please.
Because you see, our concept of health, again, health has not been really well defined by people, and especially when it comes to food. I would say the food that we were eating 100 years ago was far healthier than we're eating today.
I'm sure.
And the reason for that is the industrial part that's come in the last 70 years. We have introduced almost 80,000 chemicals into the environment in the last century. 80,000 chemicals. Nobody knows. There is not a single study that can demonstrate what the effect is, how many of those chemicals are coming in where, either through your water or through your food or through your vegetables or through the air, what that is causing on, what that effect is having on your system. But to me, it's no surprise that rates of chronic disease in the world today are perhaps the highest that they've ever been. I'm not talking about infectious disease. I'm talking about chronic disease, right? Chronic disease is diseases that you are creating within your body, right? Which are making you unhealthy. Now, 100 years ago, you had an infectious disease came that wiped out people. Today, that has become much better, right? Because we have great medicines and we have ways of sort of counterbalancing that. But 100 years ago, chronic disease was very, 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 very low. Why? Because most of it was organic. The amount of nutrition in an orange is now well established, was 10 times the amount of nutrition that we have today in the same orange, right? Because we've almost killed the biodiversity of, the soil diversity, and therefore the nutritional content in that orange or in that sweet potato or in anything that you're growing has gone down significantly. So there you've lost nutrition. Now on top of that, you've introduced chemicals. Again, chemicals whose ramifications we don't know, we don't understand fully. That has further now introduced all kinds of toxins in your body, which are playing havoc on your system, right? Now, you go further down the value chain, and then you enter a factory. In the factory, you create a product out of a food which is already lacking nutrition, food which already has a raw ingredient that already has a high amount of chemicals or toxins, and then you further induce or inject preservatives, chemicals, colors, stabilizers, artificial flavor enhancers. And why do you have to introduce flavor enhancers? Because, well, the orange will obviously not taste as good anymore, right? You've stripped it of all of its nutrition. You've also stripped it of its taste, right? So now you have to add more orange flavor. Where is the orange flavor coming from? It's not coming from nature. It's coming from a lab, right? So just in one small example of a simple ingredient or a packaged product that you eat, you have introduced possibly dozens, if not hundreds of chemicals, right? Now, it may taste good, but what else are you doing to your system? So we shied away from a lot of trends in terms of health fads, or said, let's keep it to the basics. The basics are, first of all, keep the chemicals out as much as possible, right? No processed foods, no junk food. Keep it simple, right? And so to that extent, you preserve a lot of natural flavor of the ingredients, right? So the flavor that's coming is not coming from artificial sort of additives. It's coming naturally from fresh produce, from fresh ingredients, from fresh herbs. So that's where the taste is enhanced. Ironically, that's where the nutrition is also enhanced, right? So it's actually not rocket science. What is wholesome will also be naturally more tasty. It's just that the modern industrialized food system and modern ways of marketing have convinced us.
Yeah, it's a story that I've been told so many times.
That it has to, this burger will taste better. So we have told ourselves that this will taste better. But Greenr and other brands now, which are functioning in the clean food space in India and around the world also, there's numerous examples, are going back to the old way of saying use whole ingredients, use whole foods, keep things as fresh as possible, because that's what will taste better. Now, and we're not fine dining. This generally happens in fine dining anyway, right? Farm to table, clean ingredients. As a premium cafe chain, we're maintaining the ethos of fine dining, but we're bringing it more from the perspective of retaining health, right? But that's how you get healthy food that also tastes good. Of course, the other aspect of taste is what is applicable for any restaurant, is where you keep tweaking the recipes, where you keep working on the recipes until it tastes good. And we're relentless when it comes to that. We don't, we get the right people to taste it. We taste it ourselves. and we will not launch a product that we're not happy with, and we're not getting complacent. We keep raising the standards and the benchmarks. But that's how you do healthy and tasty. And that's absolutely, if I could give one message to people, don't enter the restaurant business if you cannot create a tasty product. Bottom line. It doesn't matter what you're trying to sell. It has to be tasty and has to be appealing to a critical number of people in an addressable market. Otherwise, you will fail as a restaurateur or as a food entrepreneur.
That's where my question is, how did you know that it'll be applicable, the product market fit that you spoke about?
Yeah.
How did you know that it happened? Because you have a product which is so unique, you couldn't have had data for it, I'm sure, right? India में उसका कोई data ही नहीं था, कोई था ही नहीं vegan, vegetarian scale पे जो कर रहा था.
बिल्कुल.
So how did you know कि ये बिकेगा इस market में?
हमें नहीं पता था कि बिकेगा. So that, like any other blue ocean brand,
Blue ocean brand?
Blue
Can you
ocean
explain
meaning, so in business terms or in management terms, there's this idea of the blue ocean strategy, which is instead of entering a market where there's a lot of competition, you create or you sort of project you try and see whether there's a market for your product which doesn't exist right now in the
Okay.
So red ocean would be a competitive market. A blue ocean where there's no near or close competitor to the product that you have launched. So that's what Greenr was, because and still is actually.
I don't think hardly at this scale there are no other big.
Yeah, even globally, people have told us that the way we have developed vegan or vegetarian cuisine is not exactly the way it would be in LA.
Right.
Or London or New York, but I mean, that's what people are saying. I mean, we've still developed it for the Indian market, but we keep creating it in a way where it becomes more and more unique, right? But to your question, it works because ultimately the customer tells you whether it's working for them. At one point, we had 80% retention, right?
80%?
80%. We were told this by one of the biggest aggregators in India who looked at our data. They said, you have very high retention, customer retention. We know from anecdotal evidence, that customers sometimes come to us 3-4 times a week. So some of our customers.
In a month, how many people are eating across all your restaurants?
Approximately 25 to 30,000 people at 6 restaurants.
Right. And so you're saying that about 24,000 of them are coming every month. So retention is on a monthly basis?
I wouldn't say not on a monthly basis, just that they're coming back to you.
What is the time period?
I mean, I can't tell you an exact time period, but the fact is they come back once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and they keep coming back to you.
Oh, okay. So or rather, if I were to ask you in a month, if you have that data, I'm not sure.
I don't have that exact data, but I mean, it's fairly. I mean, there's enough data to tell us that these customers are
obviously very high.
But that's on a higher side. It's maybe now because we've gone a little bit a little aggressive on the marketing side. Not aggressive, but a little bit more on the marketing side. We were never really marketing led.
Marketing, I've never seen Greenr marketing or doing any of those things. Yeah.
Online, we're doing it because it's very competitive. When I say online, I'm talking about the online aggregators, the food aggregators. But otherwise, we don't.
Do not spend a lot of money on marketing.
No, because when you have a strong product and you have an audience for that for that product, people will anyway come to you, right? If they're wanting that product. So that's how you create that product stickiness, right? Or that brand stickiness. But that just comes from creating something that people want, right? And not being complacent and continuing to listen to them, not alienating them at some point in your brand journey. And it goes back to what we're talking about, continuing to listen to your customer always.
But वो product market fit नहीं समझा मेरे को. You said कि यार, if you have to get into the restaurant business or any business for that matter, you have to know what the market needs and you have to have a product for that. How did you know there was a market? Did you know there was a market for it?
We thought there would be a market for it. That was based on maybe our own experience of eating this kind of vegetarian food around the world, where we knew that vegetarian could be done differently. But like we've discussed earlier, the customer tells you, right? So if you launch something and someone comes to you, one thing that you do, like any place we launch a restaurant, one of us tries to be on the floor at least first couple of months and talks to people, right? So I especially early days, I try to do this a lot, just constantly engaging with customers. And in this business, and it's actually a wonderful part of the business, you get to know people a lot very quickly. They become friends also. And it's the nature of the business that you recognize them. And any restaurateur will tell you this, and they come back to you. You recognize them, you host them. That's also a part of this, right? That's why it's called the hospitality business.
I know. Yeah.
So, from there you get to learn, are they accepting your product or not? Because they'll give you feedback right there, and you can tell when they're making it up to make you feel good or when they're genuinely happy with the product. And we always tell our teams that unless the response is a wow, if it's nice, the customer will always generally not try and hurt your sentiments. So if they're feeling great about your food, they will tell you wow. But if they're not feeling that great about your food, maybe they'll tell you, oh, it was nice. Nice to me is a red flag. If not a red flag, it's an orange flag that says work on this, right? Because if a customer is telling you it's nice, he actually means it's okay. If he's telling you it's wow, it probably means it's nice, right? So, because on your face or even sometimes in written feedback forms, they will.
बहुत बुरा नहीं बोलेगा.
हाँ, especially हमारे customers बहुत अच्छे होते हैं, है ना? They don't want to. They want to support us.
वापस नहीं आएगा, but बुरा नहीं बोलेगा.
हाँ, बुरा नहीं बोलेगा. तो हमें हमेशा appreciation को discount करना चाहिए और constantly product पे काम करना चाहिए. So, again, I'm saying as difficult as it may sound, it's actually not that difficult. If you're listening to the customer, they will tell you. And if you're not doing something right, believe me, it'll start to show in the sales, And the last thing you want to see is the sales dipping month on month. That tells you that the product is not being accepted by the market. So one has to wake up, one has to sort of address, depending on the level of acceptance, either make radical changes to the product or the pricing or the positioning or the communication, whatever. You have to figure out all these variables and get it right quickly. And I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it becomes more and more difficult, but it's still possible to turn things around. There's various things that you can employ, but it requires more sustaining power because you'll be losing money potentially for a longer period of time. But that's, again, goes back to product market fit, listening to the customer.
Right. So there's also this thing of trends. 10 साल पहले when you started, I don't think India was the same. बहुत 10 साल में बहुत difference आ गया, and especially COVID हो गया उसके बीच में.
Correct.
So things have changed drastically.
Yeah.
The entrepreneur has to have that sense also कि क्या trend चल रहा है, कैसे redesign करना है, मेरे को interiors देखना है, मेरे को cutlery देखना है, मेरे को menu देखना है, मेरे को taste देखना है, मेरे को customer को देखना है. All of those factors?
Yes and no. देखिए, again, it depends. Are you a red ocean player? Are you a blue ocean player? आप trends को follow करके कुछ कर रहे हो कि आप trends को बना रहे हो?
Okay.
आप समझ रहे हो ना? आप trends को बना भी सकते हो. ऐसा नहीं कि आपको ट्रेंड्स को फॉलो ही करना है. 2015 में वीगन फैशनेबल नहीं था इंडिया में. हेल्थ भी फैशनेबल नहीं था उस तरीके से इंडिया में. वी वर जस्ट द बिग फॉरेन फास्ट फूड कंपनीज वर एंटरिंग इंडिया. एवरीवन वाज एस्पायरिंग फॉर दैट. Who wanted to eat a slow food or a healthy or a vegan or a vegetarian? It sounded completely boring, right? So somehow, we had to, stick to our conviction that this market will emerge. We have to get the product right. We have to build our customer base. We have to retain our customer base. And then slowly, as the market catches up, as the market awareness grows, then our brand and our first mover advantage will start to work for us. And that's what is happening today now. We've been maybe the pioneers in the food services space, in the plant-based or the health space in India. And today, the challenge is now on us to whether we can scale this up now to the next 30 or 100 Greeners, or whether we decide to sort of stay at this level and just see what to do. But that's the next challenge. It's not a challenge of product market fit. It's a challenge of scalability. That's right. So
which is the second challenge.
Which is the second challenge. It's a growth challenge, which every business faces at some point. So, but we're very happy that we've proven the product across multiple cities, multiple sort of segments, without much marketing support. So that's a very, very strong testimony to the fact that if you are relentless about your product development, you can make a business work. So going back to what you said, you just have to be very clear and you have to keep working on it and you have to stay true to your convictions. But again, stay true to your convictions, not to a fault that you stop listening to the market. You also have to listen to the market, to the customer, and make sure that they're also happy with the product.
Right. So roughly एक स्टोर कितने टाइम में प्रॉफिटेबल हो जाता है या ब्रेक इवन पे आ जाता है?
देखिए, दो चीज़ें होती हैं. एक होता है कैश फ्लो ब्रेक इवन, जो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है किसी भी रेस्टोरेंटर के लिए.
ओके, कैन यू एक्सप्लेन व्हाट यू मीन बाय कैश फ्लो ब्रेक इवन?
कैश फ्लो ब्रेक इवन ये होता है कि आपका मंथली आपके जेब से खर्चा नहीं जा रहा है.
ओके, जितना
तो
रेवेन्यू
मान
आ रहा है
लीजिए,
या जितना प्रॉफिट बच रहा है,
नहीं, जितना रेवेन्यू आ रहा है, खर्चे आपके रेवेन्यू से निकल रहे हैं. तो मान लीजिए आपका एक रेस्टोरेंट में 20 लाख रेवेन्यू आती है, आपकी मान लीजिए रेंट 5 लाख है, सैलरीज 5 लाख है और फूड कॉस्ट आपके 5 लाख है या थोड़े बहुत 1-2 लाख और खर्चे हैं, तो आपके 3 लाख जेब में जा रहा है. अगर 3 लाख भी जेब में नहीं जा रहा है, मान लिया आपके खर्चे और हैं, तो कम से कम आपका अगर 19 लाख भी खर्चा है तो करीब करीब आप प्रॉफिटेबल हैं ब्रेक इवन पे, है ना?
दैट्स कैश फ्लो ब्रेक इवन.
लेकिन आपने 1 करोड़ बिजनेस में लगा दिया है ना? तो वो 1 लाख अगर आपका बच रहा है तो वो कैपेक्स की भी तो रिकवरी होनी है, राइट? बट वो कैपेक्स की रिकवरी पहले नहीं सोचनी चाहिए. पहले आपको कैश फ्लो ब्रेक इवन सोचना चाहिए. मंथली लेवल पे तो आप ब्रेक इवन करिए, राइट? मंथली लेवल पे अगर आप ब्रेक इवन कर रहे हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं आपका प्रोडक्ट काम कर रहा है कुछ लेवल पे, राइट? फिर आपको देखना कितने लेवल पे काम कर रहा है, वो आपको 2-3-4 महीने में पता चलना लग जाएगा बहुत क्लियरली. अगर आपने उसको बहुत ज़्यादा मार्केटिंग सपोर्ट से बिल्डअप किया है और आपके प्रोडक्ट में दम नहीं है, तो धीरे धीरे वो आपका डिक्लाइन भी हो सकता है. अगर आपका जेन्युइन प्रोडक्ट लेवल पे वो वैलिडेशन आ रहा है मार्केट से, तो धीरे धीरे वो अपने आप बिल्ड होएगा तो आपकी रिकवरी ऑटोमेटिकली होएगी. आपका कैश फ्लो पहले पॉजिटिव होएगा. कैश फ्लो पॉजिटिव होने के बाद फिर आप देखोगे कि चलो हमारा मार्केट इस्टेब्लिश हो गया, अब मुझे अपनी प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी बढ़ानी है क्योंकि मुझे अपनी कैपेक्स रिकवर करना है, राइट? फिर वहाँ से आपकी मंथली कैपेक्स की रिकवरी शुरू होती है.
So cash flow positive या cash flow break even
is the first milestone for any restaurateur.
For a store?
For Greenr, with good graces, we hit that fairly early. We hit that maybe into the second month of operations. Yeah. Okay. But I would, again, that's all and full credit to our customers. Obviously. Who have supported us from day one. And they're our heroes. We live for them.
Capex break even?
Capex break even is a much more tricky thing because, and I don't know if I can give you a clear answer to that today because it depends on the city, depends on how much we've spent on a particular outlet. So that could vary anywhere from 2.5 years to 3 years, 4 years. Generally, or maybe even 5 years in certain cases, but generally you sign up for spaces for at least 9 years. Right?
Okay. Achha.
So you have enough time to recover your capex and then continue to sort of get a return on your investment. And overall, what you're trying to do is, as any business person, is to beat the market, whether it's the stock market or any other form of return on investment. So that's the challenge. But then in cases like ours, there's also a long-term value that's being created through the brand, right? Which is beyond the unit level.
Right, yeah.
Right? Because if that many people are coming through and they're associating you with a certain market movement or market direction or a product, then there's a potential of you to leverage that brand into other things. So we may, in the future, consider launching, let's say, some retail products or going into other aspects of business because we never saw ourselves just as a food brand. We saw ourselves as a conscious, health-forward or a wellness-forward, sustainable lifestyle brand or or a conscious brand, right? So as a conscious brand, food is only the starting point. You
Yeah,
could
so I
go
want to
into
go
any
there.
number of other areas of lifestyle.
Right, and I want to go there. The vision that you had, or the starting point that you had.
Yeah.
Between that is this is just one question that I has been going through the discussion. This was a paradigm change, if I may call it, idea. It
Yeah.
was changing the space. It was changing how people looked at vegan or vegetarian food. Right.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think that's very cool. Or that's very cool to say that you
Yeah.
wanted to make vegetarian cool again.
Yeah.
It was not so.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? Has this been something that comes from your childhood, your early life, where you want to work on things like these? You want to change the paradigm?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know where it comes from. Perhaps it comes from not just for me, but also I think for my co-founder Mohit. We were not just driven by a quick buck, so to speak. कि जल्दी से पैसे कमा के निकल लो. That's not our mindset. And especially most of my sort of good part of my life was spent in the US. And the one thing that's really nice about the US is that entrepreneurs in the US think big. They think transformatively, right? They want to change market behavior. They want to sort of create market shifts. They want to create paradigm shifts. And that's something I think we need more of in India, because we're very happy sometimes to copy business models or products from the West.
Yeah.
Whereas we can do a lot more to create indigenous products, which could not just change the way we consume in India, which can change the way we consume globally. And I firmly believe that that's possible. And I firmly believe that there will be entrepreneurs that will do this from India in the next decade or two, whether they're supported by the government or by other supportive systems or not. The sheer creative or vision of an entrepreneur will create that thing. I'm very positive about that. But as coming back to your thing about creating a paradigm shift, yes, today we talk about AI, right? We talk about the digital age, that we've fully arrived in the digital age. But please remember that for the last 100, 150 years, we were in the industrial age, right? So in the industrial age, someone was seeding the digital age, right?
Yeah.
And today that's all coming to fruition. Just like that, today we need entrepreneurs which are seeding the future of what's yet to come. And for us, we call it the conscious age, right?
The conscious age.
The conscious age. And we believe that beyond AI, when we will have so much technology in our lives, and it's already being witnessed in the more developed parts of the world, that there will be a tendency to sort of unplug, right?
Okay.
Or sort of,
Explain
go back
the conscious
to the
age, if you
basics.
can, for us.
The conscious age is very simple. The conscious age is going back to the basics of what humanity is, or human life should be, which is ensuring that we are healthy and thriving as humans, that our other humans and fellow humans are also thriving individually and collectively, and just as importantly, the rest of life, whether that's animal or plant life on this planet, is thriving. So all these three aspects, personal health, social health, and planetary health, all three have to be in balance and have to be progressing for us to really say that we have progressed as a human civilization with all the intelligence that we profess to have. Have we done that today? That's probably the subject of another podcast, but I believe there's serious challenges there. If you look at what's happened to human health by way of the chronic disease epidemic across the globe, whether in the US or India or other parts of the world, we're the sickest generation ever. Whether you look at social health, isolation across because of various reasons, whether it's sort of digital apps or social media, whatever, we have a mental health epidemic, right? We have social isolation. We have a kind of a situation where we have a few people that have a lot of wealth, and a large majority of the population has very little sort of wealth or value that they've created for themselves, and they're suffering. So we cannot say that we have progressed in an equitable manner. And when we come to the third aspect, which is planetary health, I think that's very, very evident for anyone with even some basic sense. If you're open to seeing what's happening around us, the planet is in dire straits. We forget sometimes the amount of harm that we've caused to animals. Then anytime there's a big natural disaster, we seem to be concerned about human life. But for 30, 40, 50 or 100 human people that perish, there's thousands and millions of sometimes animals that perish. So how can we really say that the planet is prospering today or the planet is progressing today? Now, how do you solve this?
Yeah.
How do you solve this? That's the thing. Now, the regulations are not solving it. The politics certainly does not seem to be solving it.
Yeah.
The global institutions are not solving it. What can solve it? I'm a firm believer, and as entrepreneurs, our partners are firm believers, that the individuals can solve it through the power of enterprise, through finding other customers who want to make conscious choices for themselves and for the planet. And Greenr seems to want to address that problem head on.
So that's the vision or the mission that you started.
That is the vision and the mission. And we don't want to be a non-profit. We want to be a viable business that has sustainability and wellness at its core. And this is not something new. I was very lucky to be sort of part of these discussions 2 decades ago in the US, and you had companies 3 decades ago in the US like Whole Foods, like Seventh Generation, who were looking at these problems and addressing these things through economics, through a conscious way of addressing these problems. And which is why, let's say in a place like California, today you have an equal split, even in the political lobby. 50% of the customers and therefore 50% of the political lobby is coming from the organic foods or the sustainable brands and the companies, and 50% of it is coming from the old school or the conventional sort of lobbies. And lobbying is a reality of life, whether we admit it or not. And that's where you influence politics. That's where you bring policy change. So let's not forget the power that a consumer has to make a choice with the product that they consume. And one should never believe whether it's a vote that you give to a politician or whether it's a product that you buy, it's a very, very important choice that you're making. And Greenr as a brand at least wants to make products available which are hopefully empowering our planet in the right direction. Now, is it a drop in the bucket? Perhaps. But I feel that's not our concern. Our concern is that we need to make the impact now. But we're very confident that we're planting the right seeds. And whether we will harvest those or some other entrepreneurs smarter than us will harvest those in the next decade, that's fine, as long as the change comes. And luckily, and I can say this, observing India in the last decade or more, there are lots of examples of great entrepreneurs who are doing fantastic things. And so Greenr, we're very fortunate that in a very small way, we've also been a platform for a lot of these entrepreneurs to launch their products. And a lot of them have gone on to be far bigger than us in terms of economics. But,
I saw a lot of brands, yeah.
But that's fine. We're interested in growing an alternate ecosystem. We're interested in growing a parallel economy, which is empowering people, planet, and that's what we're about.
2 challenges with this. Beautiful vision. I love the mission part of it, and that's where I was asking that. If you have a vision like that, how do you convert that to brass tacks implementation when you come to the ground? 2 challenges. One, with a vision of that sort, it's still very pricey. I mean, the products that you come out of that approach are still very expensive for the market to consume. One. Second, on the entrepreneur side, people in the country are not bothered about the planet, are not bothered about the social value or the people around them, right? They're bothered about how can I get rich? I want to do a business because I want to get rich, right? Yes, I am concerned about the customer in the sense that जो customer को चाहिए मैं उसको वो दूंगा. So I understand the customer. I'm not
Yeah.
a bad entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But the intention is not to preserve or protect the planet, but myself. Right? Those are the two challenges. How do you solve that?
I mean, it's a free world. Everyone can make the choices for themselves. We see another entrepreneur wants to make a quick buck. He's not concerned about these things. That's his choice. There's nothing right or wrong. We're not going to go judge that. For us, the only thing that matters are there enough customers that want to buy our product, right? So the vision is what guides us personally and what guides the brand. But what guides the business or what informs the business is the product, right? And the product has to be immediately something that can be monetized. It's that simple. So the vision keeps us on our journey towards that world, right? But the product helps keep the business afloat and keeps the business profitable. It's that simple. And that's where, we have to just on the ground do every day the things that everyday entrepreneurs do, which is to make sure that people are happy with the product, that they're buying it, that it's a right price point, that the quality is there, that we're responding to customer queries. It's not anything different from any other business. It's just that long term, our vision is very different and we want to go in that direction. And people who support us, sometimes if they believe in us or believe in the brand, they want to be in that journey also. And we're very grateful for that.
How do you motivate entrepreneurs to probably come onto that bandwagon, join that journey with you, that, be a little more conscious about the planet, be a little more conscious about the country for that matter? I mean,
Sure.
As a country, we need, we talk about getting developed and getting there, Viksit Bharat and all of that. We're probably very, very far away from that. I mean, the amount of jobs that you want to create in this country in the next decade or so is the biggest challenge, right?
Absolutely.
And it's only the entrepreneurs that can solve it.
That's
Do you
right.
agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
In fact, the biggest thing we need in this country is a real policy framework which is encouraging, at least 5 to 10 million entrepreneurs outside of the big businesses, because the real innovation, you have to understand, always happens with small businesses. It's very difficult for disruptive innovation to come from large businesses, just because of the nature of those large businesses. Their mechanics are different, our mechanics are different. So a lot of the innovation can come from small and medium businesses, and I fully believe in the power of the Indian entrepreneur to solve this country's problems. But they need basic support, policy support, to be able to do that. Unfortunately, in our country, we still have too many hurdles for small business people to, make it easy for them. Things are changing.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a pessimist.
The funding part of it, it's still getting solved to an extent.
Yes, but a lot more needs to happen. But I hope that we can do that, because entrepreneurship, especially in terms of small businesses, is the key to solving not just this country's problems, but as we discussed earlier, also creating brands which can go global from India, right? So that is the part as far as the government. I mean, as far as the entrepreneurs are concerned.
Right. So let's say there's an entrepreneur who's listening, or there's a budding entrepreneur who's listening and connects with you, understands that yes, the conscious planet is what you call it. What do you call the vision?
No, just we're saying
the conscious age.
The conscious age.
Yeah.
We're saying we want to design brands and products for the conscious age, which is also coming.
Right.
Where people are empowered to make right choices for health and planet and people.
Yeah.
How do people make that choice? It's a very individual thing. You see,
no, so I'm saying I as an entrepreneur, I as someone who connects with your.
So if they connect with this vision,
now how do I get onto this journey? Yeah.
If you see, again, if you connect to it, great. That's the purpose that drives you. It's your fuel.
Yeah.
It's what will make sure that you're doing this day in, day out. At night when you go to sleep and you wake up, you say, this is the kind of world I want to create. I'm going to give it my best. Even if I'm not profitable, or if I don't make money in the first year, or don't make my money in the second year, I've got to stick it out, because it's not an easy ride. Maybe you can make money easier doing other things, but how what kind of conviction do you have? I'm not saying that you can't make
Yeah.
money in the first month, but be ready that
Yeah.
it's not a pioneering entrepreneur is very different from an entrepreneur who tries to monetize in a quickly addressable market, right? In the VC world, they call it, faster, better, cheaper versus bold new world,
Oh
right?
wow.
That's
Okay.
another way of saying red ocean strategy, blue ocean strategy. A bold new world is like the blue ocean, right? You're trying to create a new market. You're trying to shift things. Faster, better, cheaper is what most of the Indian startups are doing. Take a problem, make it, deliver it faster, better, cheaper, right? Generally, when we talk about this kind of a vision, we're talking about doing things purposefully, consciously. Generally speaking, it is a slightly higher gestation period, but I would say, the market is catching up very, very fast, right? And I think it's going to grow very, very, even faster in the coming 5 to 10 years, especially in India, because we have a very large young population. And because of the positive side of social media, today, if someone talks about a very advanced aspect of health in California, someone even listening in Indore knows about it because of social media, right? So the ability of awareness to come in and sort of just grow very, very rapidly is very high.
Yeah, the information network is
Information,
very, very well developed
yes.
now. Yeah.
So you're betting on the human sort of, you can say that the human desire or human tendencies towards self-gain or selfishness or
Correct.
all that, but you can also say it's towards health. Depends on which coin do you want to see, right? For us, we feel that there is a significant amount of movement on the planet towards making better choices for the planet, whether it's personal health, planetary health, or social health. So we feel that that market size is growing and growing fast. And it's growing fast in India. And that is the way, if you want to create a global product, that's the best way to create a product for the world from India. And the reason for that is you have to understand that India has a continuous civilization of at least 7,000 years, if not longer. That's not something that a lot of countries can claim, right? So we have 7,000 years of history and wisdom in which we can tap into. And these are things that the world has been looking at for centuries, if not millennium, right? So why is yoga so popular all around the world? Now, why is Ayurveda so popular around the world, right? These are much, much bigger trends which in the US than they even may be in India, right? But they came from India.
Yeah.
Now that's clear.
So I understand it better, obviously. I have
Yeah.
the
So
history.
there are a lot of opportunities which will come from India, which can allow entrepreneurs to cater to a global audience. But again, it requires that you have a sense of vision of where you're playing, that you're not just going for the lowest hanging fruit, because that's easy, that's tempting, but sometimes you lose out on growing a whole tree, right? And then creating a massive market opportunity for yourself. And we would like to have more companies like this come into India, which truly shake up, which create global brands out of India. I think that possibility is there.
Right. So, did it ever happen that the vision was or seemed dwindling in front of you, or there was a choice that you had to make? कि यार मैं vision को देखूं या मैं economics को देखूं?
I think initially थोड़े से challenges थे, but I don't know. We can say with grace or with people's love and support, we've been able to grow. And again, it's just that. It's that conviction. It's the conviction that in some way, as a small business, you're also supporting 1,000 people, your families, their families, through the jobs that they have in your business. These are the things that keep you going as an entrepreneur. And say, okay, doesn't matter where the world is going, you keep doing your bit, and that's all that matters. You do what's in your control. You don't worry about what's not in your control.
Yeah, it's
Simple.
lovely. You often hear about these conscious things or things that are better for people or the society or the planet, like you said.
Sure.
But they're not economically viable. I'm glad that we had this conversation, because Greenr is an example. It's very important. ऐसी जितनी भी चीज़ें होती हैं उनके साथ जनरली ऐसा ही होता है ना कि इन्वेस्टमेंट लगेगा यार, इससे पैसा नहीं कमा सकते आप. इट विल बी एन NGO sort of institution.
That's the biggest misconception. Greenr is not the first business. Let's not be arrogant, or let's not be, that we've done anything very magical. We're not the first business to create a blue ocean play in this space. We had lots of other trailblazers, not just in America, but even in India, who had a sense of vision, who have created beautiful businesses.
Yeah, there are many businesses that are coming up.
So it's absolutely possible. But it's a very individual thing. It depends on the entrepreneur, what drives them. All we're saying is that we believe the market opportunity is there. It just requires the vision and conviction today more than ever.
Wonderful, Nitin. This was a lovely, lovely discussion. I loved every bit of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm sure the listeners, the viewers are going to love it as well. There's so much to take away.
Thank you.
And I think towards a conscious age.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you.